I'm Ralph Wade, an alcoholic. In my drinking days, at conferences like this, I don't know if you were like me, but I just couldn't stand conferences, business conferences and stuff like that. And I remember they used to wear nameplates, and I would never wear the damn thing. I couldn't, something about it I just couldn't stand. It was too pat, too organized, too nice. So I wouldn't wear the damn things. And I suppose in the old days, I know this is symbolically very nice and good, but in the old days, I probably would have had a few drinks in me and stand up here and eaten the damn thing. Or drop my pants and done a hula for you or something like that. So I'll just leave it on, I guess. I'm sure it means something very nice. Well, I want to thank Ed and Bonnie and the committee for inviting me over. I don't do much speaking, as you'll soon find out. Got here the other day. I'm not much of a flyer. My daughter and granddaughter live over here in Maui, and I must admit, in all honesty, it's an honest program, that one of the reasons I took this this invitation was because I get a chance to see my granddaughter and my daughter, who flew over from Maui and have been and are sitting over there in the side right now. So I gotta watch my step a little bit with my story here. And you know, I'm not much of a flyer, and for some reason when the plane's crowded, I get nervous. I don't mind it if there's like 1/3 loaded in a big DC-10 or something. I say I don't care. I've got a lot of room, and but when it's crowded, every seat is taken. And I happen to be in the middle, next to, if you'll pardon me, a very fat lady. And I shouldn't say that, because she may be here. I don't think she is. She was very nice. But all I kept thinking was, if this damn thing goes down, how am I going to get over her or around her? And I had it all planned. I was just going to step right on her shoulder and go right for the door. We got here and Thursday, and it was real good to see Ed. We go back a long ways. In fact, after the Thursday meeting, we had Bonnie and Ed and I and somebody else, pretty young girl, yeah, had coffee over there, and we got talking. And one of the first things, which is a ritual with Ed and me, he tells a really awful joke, and I laugh like hell because I think he's the funny. You know, remember the Burns and Allen? I mean, every time George Burns even looked at, not Allen, at Jack Benny would just fall apart. He just could. And every time Ed starts a joke, I just start laughing. I can't stop. And it wasn't a lousy joke, Ed, but it wasn't that great. But afterwards, we hadn't been together for a lot of years, and I asked about Big Mike, and who was a dear friend of ours, and like all real old-timer, like old-timers, people get old and get a little worn out, and I guess Mike is getting on. Still with us, thank God, but getting on, and we got talking about Eddie Regan, who was my sponsor, and Ed's sponsor, who in the early days, and Eddie's gone. Eddie used to stand up, and first thing he'd do is take off his coat and throw it on the back of a chair and start talking. He was also the kind of guy I couldn't get away from. That's why he was my sponsor. He's one of these guys that when he talks to you, he'd be about this far away from you. You spend your whole conversation. He was an incredible, wonderful representative of AA and got me through those early years with such love and such commitment, such being there all the time. He He died a little while, after I had a few years. He died sitting up in his chair at home reading a big book. So we got talking about a lot. The only other place Eddie, I think, would have rather died was in an AA meeting, but he was too concerned about the newcomers to want to scare him, so he died at home. We talked about a lot of Chuck C. and all the old timers, and it felt a little morose for a second. I mean, here we are together after 10 or 15 years, and here we're talking about who's getting old and who's done all the old timers that have gone on. But I thought about it later. It really isn't morose. When you're out there in that world and somebody passes on, there's always a reaction. I mean, if there's a fear, there's a, oh my God, oh, it's a terrible, oh, yeah. And in here, when an old timer moves on, the feeling is, well, he just moved. We're all trudging this road together. They just went on ahead a little bit. The feeling really is, among the people I know, and certainly me, is that the first feeling is, God damn, they trudged that road and they finished sober. They're going to be sober forever now. God, that's wonderful. God bless them. Thank God we had them for a while. There's a joyfulness about it, having had them. It's not filled. There's something about being in this program for a time and having some of the older fellas move on and new fellas come in and new women come in and take over, that this voyage is a glorious voyage, and there's no sadness, there's no sense of oh God, isn't life awful? Isn't life wonderful? Isn't sobriety wonderful? Isn't AA wonderful? I used to be really spent a lot of time thinking about death, and when I was drinking, and even in the early years. I mean, I talked to Eddie, my sponsor, once about it. I said, Eddie, how do you handle that? And he said, oh God, Ralph, if I died right this minute, I'm still the most blessed man in the world. God can take me anytime he wants. The life I led, and then I got here 25 or 30 years ago and had this life of AA, I am the most blessed man in the world. He's given me everything I could ever want and more. So I'm ready. And that helped me, that doesn't concern me much anymore. It doesn't concern me really at all anymore, because AA has taught me to be really in life and not be worried about those things. It's in God's hands. Everything's all right. When I was a kid, though, I was terrified about that. I remember when I was a little boy, my mother used to have to sit on the edge of the bed and just sit with me for a long, long time every night, because I was afraid if I went to sleep, I wouldn't wake up. I was terrified. I was a frightened little child, and I guess it had a lot to do. I don't think much about blaming anybody anymore, or justifying or explaining or understanding how I ended up an alcoholic and went through all that crap I had to go through before I got here. I don't blame anybody, but I did have a very violent, very charismatic, very energetic, and drunk for a father. And he scared the hell out of me. And one of the things I think when you have a lot of violence and loudness and arbitrary, you don't know what's going to happen next, is that you get terrified. And I was terrified. And I think that's probably one of the reasons I couldn't go to sleep at night. One of the things that I think, as I say, I'm not much into trying to understand psychologically anymore, and that stuff, because it's just gone. It's too good to. That stuff doesn't have any power really over me anymore. But what I think happens then is in those early years when you're just kind of forming, unless you have some consistent, loving, safe environment, you don't come together. You don't become you. You don't become an I. You don't become somebody. I mean, I see my granddaughter. My daughter is such an incredible mother. I see her, and she is open. She's not frightened. She's willful. She's not afraid to take chances. She's joyful. She's bright. She's had an environment that's loving and protected and safe, and giving her time to become a person. And those of us who were raised in alcoholic families, at least me, my feeling is I never had a chance to. I was just so worried and so frightened and that I was going to be destroyed. And I think that's why that death thing came, because I thought, this man can obliterate me. I'm such a fragile little, I didn't think I was fragile then, but such a fragile little being that if you give him that all the time from nowhere, you don't get going. You don't become, you. Or you have trouble becoming you. And I was a frightened little kid. I mean, I remember at 7 years old, for some reason, when he came home, God, I was afraid when he got home that something was going to happen. And at 7 years old, I remember he'd yell coming in the door, "Get in here!" And I would actually pee my pants in the kitchen, hiding behind my mother. 7 years, and humiliated, 7 years old. I was also, I guess it drove me because I was a very frenetic kid. I was, there's a guy on one Art Family or one of those early shows that would talk like this when a little kid would talk like, and that's how my voice was. I was straining so hard in life, I don't know for what, and I was running, my voice would be like this. I had a voice like this when I was about this tall, and everybody used to tell me, your veins are going to pop, because I was running around trying to have a good time. I think that's one of the things characteristics of my life, a lot of terror, terrified. And one of the worst things is when that eye isn't strong and well developed and kind of feel safe, you feel centered, is when you get terrified, that goes. Everything goes. And that's the most humiliating, embarrassing, shameful, guilt-ridden kind of thing, because you just feel, I'm nothing. If something happens that frightens me, I just turn into jelly. And I fought hard all my life to not let that happen. And a part of that, of course, was with that injustice. I felt that was so unjust at home, that arbitrary, violent behavior. So I developed a very strong sense that things should be just and right in this world. It shouldn't be like this. So I developed early on with a very fragile eye, and if you have a fragile eye and you get to AA, and you're supposed to turn it over, and you've been fighting for 45 years just to get one, to get an ego, and then they say turn it over. It's a long battle. I've been at it 20 years now. Are you kidding? Turn it over. I'm not even sure I have one to turn over, and if I have it, I'm going to hang on to it. Damn it! I've been working hard for it. So it's a tough battle, I developed this kind of sense of being a warrior. This is not right. Life shouldn't be like that. I'm going to make it better. I remember I was the oldest of 5 kids, and I was the caretaker. I was my mother's helper. I had plans to get rid of him when I got big enough, and she and I were going to go down. I was going to spend my life taking care of her and my brothers and sisters. I was a warrior. I was going to take care of business and make things right. So I grew up with this kind of heroic, a combination of I guess you would call me a cowardly warrior or a terrified hero. I mean, that's what I've been going through life with. And you take somebody like that, who with the kind of, there's a lot of, I also had, my father was just drunk with this high energy that when he was feeling good, and he loved to laugh and raise hell. So I also had that kind of sense of humor. It was a kind of a blasphemous, iconoclastic sense of humor. His favorite word is they're phonies. He was isolated. He only wanted his family around him when he wasn't at the bar. And so everybody was a phony. The world was phony, and I picked that up. I hate phoniness. I hate it myself. All through the years, I was always talking about a bunch of phony, like the things at the thing. Everybody was with these things on. That's a bunch of phony stuff. Well, I had all of these elements in this personality that really wasn't very sure of who he or she was. Now, you give somebody like that at 15 or 16 a good shot of Rock and Rye, which I got, or a couple of shots of Seagram 7, which I got at that time, And man, all that complexity and mixed signals and crossed wires and all these things. Hey. What do you mean, scared? Scared of what? Bring it on! Or the hero thing, you sit there and you think, yeah, I can do it. I'm going to get him. You're never quite sure what you're going to get or who you're going to get, but you're going to win. You're going to make it right. And I have a lot of those elements, and it's traveled with me all through my drunken years, and I must say, through my sober years. Finally got out of the house. The heroic side, I joined the Marines at 18. Now, I get a lot from my mother. She's a very gentle, loving, wonderful, that was the safe side. Women and me go way back. I mean, what complications there? Never mind complications with the male side. But that's the comforter. That's the one that assures that if I get too nervous and too upset and too drunk and too hungover, I need somebody to hold me and make it all right, make me feel all right. So what I was doing in the Marines, I don't know. I mean, I remember I was a prison chaser for a while in the Marines. Good, there my granddaughter's going. I can get real. They say you should. Good night, honey. You should give your story in a general way, but I'm an actor and sort of a writer and artists don't do things in a general way. I mean, you do it in a specific way. I mean, art is no good if it's general. It's specific. So I have to talk specific. I don't know what it means to say what it was like and what happened, what it's like now in a general way. I have to be very specific. Anyway, I'm this prison chaser. In Annapolis, Maryland, I'm a Marine Guard with a .45, and the stewards at Annapolis are a couple hundred black guys that serve the midshipmen. And they get drunk once in a while, and they end up in the brig, and then they get 30 days or something. And what you got to do would get them out for some areas. You get on a .45, and they assign you 6 or 8, and you take them out to the boondocks out in the firing range, and they clean up out there, way away from everybody. Can't even see them. And I remember walking them out there. We get out there, and I say, now listen, fellas, because they told me if anyone escapes, you have to serve their time. And I believed it. So I said, fellas, sit down, smoke, have a good time. Nobody run, please. You don't have to do any work. I'd sit over there, and they'd start kidding me and trying to frighten me and everything, and we got through that all right. But I got out of the Marines and ended up in college, talking my way into college. I think one of the things, maybe I'm not as dumb as I think I am. I think one of the reasons I got the GI Bill, one of the reasons I went in the service, and I talked my way into college, and all those, I was still the hero. I was the guy in the freshman. They had pledge week, or not pledge week. They had some week where you had to wear beanies, and you had to say yes, sir, and you had to do. I walked around with my Marine jacket, and I spent all my time in a local beer bar downtown. And I was about to give these upperclassmen, what are you kidding me? I'm an ex-Marine. I'm not gonna do those things. And so I had that heroic thing going, that big shot thing going, that special thing going, which I have had all my life, that I'm special. I'm different, I'm special, and I got a great destiny ahead of me if I can figure out what it is. And I did the same kind of frightened heroic thing. I kissed butt to get into the best fraternity. I mean, I just humiliated myself. My father was a fraternity member up at Colgate University, and his best fraternity was there in the same at Bucknell where I was going, and I went over there and said my father was in Colgate, and I walked around with my hands out, and I finally got into a fraternity. And after I was in, I finished the pledge year or 8 months or whatever it is, I quit. Nobody ever quit at this college or fraternity. But I quit because my best friend in the dormitory was a Jew. And I found out they don't let Jews in the fraternity. I said, screw you guys. I would rather be with him. I'm quitting. They said, you can't quit. You know the magic handshake. You know all the magic words. And it's Lambda Chi Alpha, and those guys are stills, and I quit. I said, I quit. I'm through. I am not a brother of yours. And I never went back, and it was announced in the school paper. I became a celebrity for having quit be the first one to quit the fraternity. And, of course, all the time I'm drinking beer every day down at the local beer bar. And this heroic, terrified combination came through again. I was, at that time, an agnostic, an atheist. I believed that it was the opiate of the people, that we have to stand up and take charge of our lives. And I was a good socialist, and this was a Christian university. They made you go to chapel. They made you do all kinds of things like that. And I refused on principle to do anything like that. And I became a philosophy major, and I stood up at various meetings and forums, and I said, God is dead. What is? And I attacked the Christian faith, and I was an atheist, and this is bad. This is terrible. This is dishonest. This is being frightened of life. And the head of the Christian Association was this very pretty girl, and she had quit her sorority. And so I fell in love with her. I was attacking her, and then I fell in love with her, and I asked her to marry me, and she wouldn't marry me because I wasn't a Christian. She was a very serious Christian. So I bludgeoned her. I took her hostage like we do with people. I just bludgeoned her for weeks and weeks, and she finally married me. And it took her about 12 years to pay me back for forcing her to marry her. But all those years I was drinking, but I was drinking heavy. I was a heavy drinker. I got drunk. I got in blackouts. I got in trouble. But that was part of my heritage. I mean, I grew up surrounded by all my uncles and aunts, and everybody in my family were heavy, heavy drinkers and alcoholics. And so I was a heavy drinker, and didn't seem to interfere that much with. It's only later when you go on too long, too hard, and life begins to get a little more intense, and responsibility become heavier, and you get older, that it begins, and it did. It began to get tough. It began to get tougher. That marriage was tough. Another thing I did, from being an atheist and attacking, this religious stuff, is that once she married me, I gave up the fight, and I ended up going to Yale Divinity School and becoming a minister. I mean, I don't know how. I didn't go up there. I was still an atheist. I had read a book by one of the theology professors up there, and I really was impressed with it. I was going to be a philosophy teacher, and I went up there to talk to this guy. And it was a book that I'd read called The Moral Life and the Ethical Life by Alessio Vivas, a Chicago philosopher. And I was impressed with it. And this guy had written an article on it, this theologian up at Yale. So I went up to talk. I just took a ride up on a Saturday and he happened to be there. And we sat down and talked all afternoon. And at the end of the afternoon, this old man said, "Why don't you come study with us for a year?" And I said, "Okay." So I wrote to be admitted, and they sent back and they said, "No, you can't be admitted. You have no vocational direction. You're not even a Christian. What do you want to come to a seminary for?" And I wrote to Mr. Niebuhr, and Mr. Niebuhr wrote to them, and I got that I was admitted. So I went up there, and I found up there a community of people. I drank. I lived in a Quonset. We had one child then, and it was a wonderful time. But I had my martinis every night, and on weekends or when I got a little too restless, I'd walk into New Haven and I'd sit in a bar for a few hours, but not. And once in a while, when I went out with my friends, I'd get real blotto, but it didn't seem to be that bad. And that's how it went. I went through. I became a minister. Went to an actual. I mean, I finally. It's a long story how I got from being an atheist to being a minister, but it mainly had to do with that community up there, with a committed community of people who were of service to the world, and I was impressed with that, and I slowly eased into that, and I only lasted 5 years at that, and then I left because I was drinking more heavy, and I was more upset with the fact that social justice was being ignored by the church, and I was going to put up with it. I think it was mainly my drinking, and ministers, if they're heavy alcoholic drinkers like I was, there's 3 or 4 in the parish that are also alcoholics, and you find them, and then you go over, and they protect you. You drink at their house, and you drink at little parties, and they protect you, and you can get drunk as you want, and nobody's going to find out about it. Well, unless you get carried away too much. There was a little incident with a deaconess but I ended up leaving. and didn't know what to do, still didn't know what to do with my life, still felt like a hero, still felt special, still wanted to have some destiny. And I ended up on a little farm up in Rowayton, Connecticut, not knowing what to do with my life. I had been committed. I had really thought I'd found my way, and I hadn't. And I was drinking heavy, and the marriage was not working that well, and we had 3 little girls by now. And I went to work in a bar, went to work in a bookstore, started not coming home sometimes till very, very late, and sometimes not at all, and tried hard to maintain the family, and then it just wasn't working. I had been I never imagined I'd get divorced. I didn't intend to do anything like that. When I was raised, nobody got divorced in those early years. This was it, but it was getting painful. We were getting more and more distant, and I mean, all my family thought we had the wonderful marriage. When we broke up finally, none of my brothers and sisters or anybody could believe it. If we couldn't make it. I mean, we had a good facade. We were caring people. We tried to make it work, and it just wasn't. And I was drinking more and more, and I didn't know what I was doing. And at one point, my wife, I guess she had enough, and she went out and started acting up, and I found out about it. And although I was out running all over the place, I guess I was destroyed by that. I just had this ego that couldn't stand that, and we still hung in there, and it was over. But we couldn't let go of it. We had 3 girls, and finally, after about 3 years of hanging in there and drinking heavier and heavier and heavier, I decided I was going to go. And a couple of weeks later, I was just about getting prepared to move, to leave, and actually, I was living in New York. By then, I was working for a publishing company and living in a really tacky room and not doing any work. I had a secretary, and I'd say I was a publicity director. I'm going out to interview some authors or some newspapers, and I go sit and drink. And I live in this one room, and I go out there on weekends to be with them, and I was more and more isolated. I remember there was on 2nd Avenue, there was a bar where deaf people went. It was near a deaf school, and I used to hang out in there because nobody talked. It was quiet. It was real quiet. Nobody bothered you. The trouble with that is that after you're there a while, if you look around at all, you realize, Jesus, these people are just like people who talk. I mean, there's the loudmouth, and really, and there's the shy ones, and they dance because they put the music box on loud enough and they can hear the vibrations and dance to it. And I really hung out there because nobody would bother me. And anyway, it was just getting toward the end. It was really going to be over, and I was drinking more, and I was going to lose my job. And my oldest daughter was, as happens in families, my oldest daughter was my best buddy. As my wife and I couldn't talk anymore, my daughter and I used to hang out together, go for walks in the park, and she was very mature and very bright and very sweet. And we found out, a little lump on her back, we found out that she had cancer at 8 years old. And they told us one day that she had 15 months to live. And that was too much for this drunk. I wasn't able to handle any reality, much less anything like that. So I remember saying to myself, I'm going to hang in here until this is over, and then I'm getting the hell out. And so I did. I hung in for 15 months, maintained my drinking, take my daughter up to Sloan Kettering, get her chemotherapy, watched her get weaker and weaker. Maintained my drinking when she was asleep or during the day, early in the morning. Just maintain enough to keep me from going crazy. And the day they called me to say that it's not any good anymore, we better pull the tubes. They called me to have a conference about that. My wife had to call me at 9 o'clock in a bar because she knew the number of the bar, and that's where I was. And I had to go over to the hospital from the bar and make that decision. And a couple of hours later, she was dead. And from then on, my drinking got terribly important and serious and tough. I've never said that before speaking. I never brought up my daughter, and I never used. It's not an excuse for drinking. I was drinking a lot, and I was a drunk long before that. But that turned it to a kind of a nightmare of just abandon, and I had become an actor in there somewhere. Another one of my heroic moves. I was making a pretty good salary at this publishing house, and I said, and I was in this deaf bar, and a guy who was I was a minister to, knew I hung out there, came in from Garden City, where my last church was, and I had helped him with his children. I was a pretty good minister. And he said, let's have dinner. And I said, nah. He says, come on. And he was an actor. Somebody just mentioned the old, you mentioned the other day, Bill Hayes. He was on that show you were on. Remember the singer, Bill Hayes? And Bill took me to dinner. And he said, what are you going to do? I said, well, I'm going to go have a few drinks. He said, come on. I go to an acting class. Why don't you come in? It's interesting. Actors in New York go to class all their lives. So I went. They do. They work at it. And it's not like Hollywood, where they don't work at it even before they get it. Never mind after they get it. So I went, and I was amazed. And I went back because I had nothing else to do. And about the third time, the teacher said, hey, we need partners. And there were pretty girls there. I mean, not only pretty girls, but alive girls. You know, I mean, really, actresses are interesting up to a point. I don't mean to be so smart, alecky. I don't know why I said that. So I did a scene, and I did a thing called Moody's Kid Don't Cry, where this guy is hung up. He's from the woods. He's a woodsman, and he's married, and he's in this factory town, and he wants to bust out and get the hell back where it's free. And I rehearsed it, and first scene I ever did, I got up there, and there was this guy. It says he breaks chairs, he breaks windows, he just has to free himself, and I did it. I carried on. The whole class is backing up. But I finished that scene, and I said, my God, oh, is that great? Oh, does that feel good to get it out? Oh, you know, and that was it. There's more to it than that, but that was the beginning of me being an actor. And so it went. I didn't work. You know, I left the publishing. I got a job as a bartender, and I went around knocking on doors and tried to study and try to get work as an actor and do plays. And I guess the drinking had taken me at that point to now I had left the family, but I still remained some. That girl that was here a little while ago, she was just a little one then. 3 months after my oldest daughter died, I sat him down one time, little kids, 6 and 4, I think at the time, and said, Daddy's got to go. I gotta go for a while. I gotta go away. And they said, okay, I guess. They just looked at me, and I went. But I went back. But all the time, a few times a week, I go back to the apartment, take him out, go for walks, try to maintain something. And I don't know what I was going to say about him. Oh. And the image I have of where the drinking was taking me was I didn't have any money, and I stayed in a cheap hotel room, and there was no windows. It was in a chute. It opened up into a air chute, and there was no television. It was too cheap in a place, and my ex-wife needed a little time, and I would take them, and I'd say, well, they can come stay with me, and we'd go out for the day, and once in a while they'd stay with me. I didn't want them to really stay. It was such a bad place, and I had no money to buy them dinner or anything. But I have this image of me being in this place with my 2 little girls in this 15-watt bulb with no television, with no air, no window, no light, with a dirty, kind of smelly bed, and those 2 little girls going to sleep with me sitting there with them and wanting them to go to sleep so I could run out quick and get a drink and come back and watch them and take care of them. And I had 1 pair of pants, and it had a hole in them. And I knew the maitre d' who's in the program now at the local bar. Not maitre d', the guy, the host. And I used to run over there, and he was my best friend, but I hated to ask him to buy me a drink. I was just too proud. So I'd stand there, and say, I wish this guy would offer to buy me. And he'd always do it, but it sometimes took him a little long. Come on, have a drink. Than others, and I would have to get back to my daughters, and I needed a drink, and I wasn't going to ask him, and I had got some tuna fish that I'd made him a sandwich before they went to bed, and I'm standing there, offer me a drink so I can get it and get the hell back to take. That's my image of where the drink had been taking me, and from there it got worse. I ended up finally. This same guy said to me one night, he's sitting having a drink. He says, "Well, you've taken this town by storm. Why don't you try Hollywood, Ralph?" So I said, I think I will. I think I'll go out there and win a few. So I ended up in Hollywood, living on Hollywood Boulevard in a cheap hotel, drunk, panicked, terrified, worried, and running the streets, looking for some comfort from anybody who'll give it to me, any hooker, anything. Getting a few bucks and going and getting drunk, being in blackouts twice a day anyway. Get up and start drinking, and by noon, 11 or 12 o'clock, I'm in a blackout, and I can get a little sleep. And I get up at 3 or 4, and I can go out and start drinking again, and I'm in another blackout. Drinking. And as Milton said the other day, I don't know, I like that image of God throwing out and letting you go, and then I had an agent who was a friend of mine, an ex-drunk, and he was from New York, and he would send me out. And one day he calls me and he says, at the hotel, they need a father on this Walton series. This is a new series. It's a piece of crap. It ain't ever going to do a thing. It's much too gentle and syrupy and stupid. It won't go. But you get paid if you get it, they'll probably do 3 or 4 shows before they cancel it. But nobody believes it's going to go anywhere. You pick up a few bucks, you can get the hell out of town and back to New York, which I couldn't get back to New York. I didn't have enough money. So I remember going over there, and I says, television? I'm a movie star. What do you mean television? And I went over there, and I remember sitting there where they're going to screen test. There's about 4 of the guys, and I don't know, I'm in my 40s now. I'm 42, I guess, 41. And I feel like a baby. And these guys are all my age or a little older, and I think these guys look like fathers. They look like men. I feel like a little kid, nothing. And I kept running across the street and grabbing a shot and going back and sweating and stinking. And I said, what am I doing here? This is ridiculous. I'll never get this job. And they finally called me in the screen test. And I had done, these guys weren't actors. These were, well, they were actors, but they hadn't any real training. Or, they were guys who came to Hollywood to make a bundle. And they hadn't trained or anything. And I had trained. I'd actually trained. So I did go in, and I remember saying, this is terrible. But Richard Thomas was in the scene in the thing, and I remember saying, it's all over, and I'm walking out, and I said, I can't let this go. So I stopped with that drunken chutzpah, and I turned around, and the camera was still running, and I said, and I took a long pause, and I looked at him, I said, good night, son. They bought it. They bought it. They bought that. Just that moment of kind of real contact. And I got hired for this job as a father with all these kids. And I had the first thing I did was had the craft service guy make sure there was vodka and grapefruit juice ready at 6 a.m. when I got there. And I don't know what happened, but something must have been left. I was really stunned. I was in a lot of darkness and pain. I was just hanging on. But something began to happen to me. I said, I can't do this. The first 3 shows, I was drunk. I was drinking, and I heard the cameraman say one day, let's get this before noon, because we'll never get it afternoon with this guy. And I says, what are these guys doing? They showed me the first show, what we did. I was wrestling a bear. Can you believe this in the first show? I mean, the guy was dressed up. He had a real bear. He wrestled the bear, and then he'd dress up and they'd get shots of me. He was in a bear suit, but even that scared me. I mean, and I remember we went to to look at the show, the first show, and it was a big screen in a little room, and I said, this face came on, this face, bloated, haunted, scared face, the town. The town drunk. I mean, I ran across the street and got drunk. I couldn't stand the face. How can these guys hire me? This is supposed to be a nice, gentle, kind, considerate father. That's the town drunk there. I found out later the guys in the front office were a bunch of drunks, and that's why they didn't fire me, I guess. But something was happening. I can't take that little Elizabeth and sit her on my knee and say the raccoon died because that's what life's all about. I mean, I'm serious. I couldn't do it. I said, something's got to give here, and I'm teaching her about life. And, we all have some honesty in us left, some shred of integrity. And I remember saying, God, I don't want to quit because I'm making some money here. But I can't do this. And you get up at 6 in the morning, and I worked, I did a couple of things here and there, but you do it 2 or 3 weeks, and this is going on and on and on, and it goes from 6 in the morning to 8 at night, and I can't. I went to an AA meeting. I don't know how I got to one. I don't know how I got to it. I had heard about it before. In fact, when I was a minister, I started one. I would have my martinis in the parsonage and go over and conduct an AA meeting with 3 other people in Fishers Island, New York. Then I had a book. I went to New London, found out how you do it. I'd have a few martinis and go over and do the meeting. Oh, I'm going on too long, and I just got sober. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it. I didn't know what I remember I went to that meeting, and I went home instead of to the bar, right from the meeting home, and I'd been in this house. I had some money now. I rented a house, and I had a woman to take care of me, of course. I forget her name right now, but she was... No, you always had somebody around to take care of you if you're a drunk. And I do remember her name. She was wonderful. But I was using her. And I remember walking upstairs, and I wasn't in a blackout. And I looked at the room, and I said, I'd been living there 3 months. I said, Jesus... This bedroom's a pretty room. And there was windows of English type with the panes. They opened up, and there was a street light, and it was shining on some avocado tree that was out in front. Big, green, shiny leaves. And I said, there's a breeze coming in. I said, God, this is nice. And I got in this bed that I'd been living through. I mean, I hardly ever got up to bed. If I came home at all, I'd sleep on the couch or somewhere. She'd drag me upstairs in a blackout. I got in between the sheets, and I said, Jesus, this is nice. Boom, I was asleep for the first time in 10 years anyway. Asleep, not in a blackout, not passed out. Woke up and it was morning. Didn't sit up in the middle of the night in a cold sweat saying, I'm going to die. What did I do? Who did I do? Just woke up. And I'd had a night without, and I couldn't believe it. And I didn't want to think about it. I didn't know what was going on. I didn't understand it. I was really mocus. And I got through that day at work, and I went to a meeting that night. I had one whole, and I didn't know what was going on. It had been too many years without hope, without any sense of anything. And I had another day, and another, and I didn't understand it. It was a gift. It came out of nowhere. I didn't understand it. And another, and another. About the 7th day, I said, Jesus, something's working. I better get with these steps. I think I'll do the amend step first. I owe that bartender over in Hollywood $100. I'm going to make an amend and pay him his bucks. And I walked in, I didn't know. He said, where the hell you been? He took a shot glass, he poured vodka, and he used to put bitters in it when it was during the daytime so I could get it down. And I went to pay him the $100, and I realized I'm going to drink that drink. Of course. I don't have any defense against this. I wasn't even thinking that. I just knew that I was going to drink that drink. And I'd had 7 or 8 meetings, and I said, whoa. I couldn't leave. I knew I was going to drink the drink. I was powerless. I mean, it was no question. There was no... But I went to the back of the head in the back instead of leaving. And I said, Jesus, well, what's going on here? And I remember the images of your faces for those 7 meetings, the smiles, and the gift you'd given me of reaching out and accepting me, and this broken down drunk. And I saw those faces, and I said, don't turn your back on him. Don't. I didn't know anything about. I never thought about being sober for life. I just showed up at meetings. I didn't know what being sober would be. Don't turn your back on. Don't turn your back on. And walked right past the drink out in the sidewalk, and as soon as I got out, boom, it was gone. It was gone. It was like the devil said, Jesus, that's the first time he's ever done anything like that. Something's going on. We better back off for a little while. We'll get him down the road, but we better back off for a little while. Because it was gone. And I haven't had a drink since. And I got to stop. I got so much to tell you. I haven't spoken at a convention ever before. And I'd like to take a few more hours if you don't mind. You don't like the girl this afternoon? You were great at 4 a.m.? Oh, this morning at 6? I had you right there. I just want to stop by saying, God, there's so much to say about sobriety and about what I've learned. I'm still a warrior kind. I still got that problem, and I still get scared once in a while. But last night, I was sitting over there listening to you with my granddaughter and my daughter, who came over to visit me, and she fell asleep, and I wanted her to hear the Al-Anon, and then we'd take her back, and I'd come here, Milton. She could stay with the baby. I thought I was going to have to stay with the baby for the Al-Anon, but the baby wanted to come. The baby, 4.5. And there was the break, and I picked her up. She was fast asleep, and I walked through the hall with her. Nobody paid much attention, and it was like those early years before things got bad, when I had this little lovely thing in my arms, and a daughter who I'd abandoned, who was next to me, smiling and loving me, and all the life that I've been given because of AA. It was very moving. Something about moving through this love and this sobriety with these people I love. I was so deeply appreciative and so joyful. I get back to my room, and when I married my wife 10 years ago, she had a 6-year-old son who had been devastated by alcoholism, and he was dyslexic, and he was frightened, and he was unable to function at all. And we've worked. He's lived in a sober life. He's now 22, and he's lived in a sober environment. We've tried our best. But he's frightened, and he can't work, he can't go to school, he's just trying to get started. He's a great kid, no booze, no drugs. And about 3 months ago, I says, Liam, he wants to be an actor the last few months. And I said, Liam, you want to be an actor? Come on down. Stop living in L.A., hanging out those places. Come on down and live with us in the desert for a while. About a month ago, because I just got back from New York a month ago. And I says, we'll work together. I'll teach you a little bit about it. He was too afraid to go to class because if he got caught not being able to read, he'd be too embarrassed. And so we hung out together at night, and I got a bunch of monologues, and I said, read this thing. And he couldn't read it, and we read it together, and then he read it. He can read. He's just too frightened to read. He can read a little. And I said, well, now read it to me. Stand up. And he read it, and I said, now memorize it. And he took a day to memorize it, and he came in and he said it. I said, well, that's acting. Tell me a story. Just tell me the story. And I called a friend and was doing a play called Equus up in Palm Springs at the Playhouse. And I said, is there any little parts up there? And he says, actually, they made the lead horse Great part, great kind of physical thing with this big horse's head. And he also has a scene. They need a lead horse. There's 3 horses. The others don't have words. I said, well, how about if I send Liam up? And I said, no, come on, let's get the play. We'll read the part where the scene is. And we worked on it for 3 or 4 hours. And he's never done anything like this. And he went up there and he came back 2 hours later and said, I got the part. And I called home last night and it opened. And my wife said, that kid stood up there. He did those lines. He marched around that stage like a horse. Everybody gave him big hands. He was wonderful. He took that first step. And I thought, God damn, that's sobriety. And then I talked to her. I said, I got to speak tomorrow. And I don't know what to say. I don't know what to say. What'll I tell him, honey? And she said, well, tell him, don't be too specific, Ralph, because you might scare off the newcomers. But tell him this, because I had a tough time with this, and she did, and I do. She said, tell him it's not all roses, peaches, and cream. 20 years now sober. She's got 12. We've had some tough times. It wasn't for AA, I'd have run 15 times. That marriage would have been over 15 times anyway. If it weren't for Billy Boyle saying, I don't give a damn how mad you are, go on home. I'm not going home. I'm staying in this hotel. Go home. Well, go home or I'm not your sponsor. All right, I'll go home. I mean, 2 people who have to learn how to live and how to love, and that ain't easy, man, when you don't know anything about it. And I said, she says, tell him, because I was confused about this. She said, I thought you're supposed to feel great all the time. If you're really working the program, you're just life is just wonderful. She says, no, man, it's not. It's full of difficulties and full of pain and full of wonder and full of beauty. It's all kinds of things, but it's tough. It ain't easy. And if you don't stick close, you haven't got a chance. Tell him to stick close like we do. If you don't stick close, that devil, that monster, that darkness that's still there, it's just hiding. If you don't stick close in the light, in the sunshine, it's going to come out and it's going to grab you. It's going to grab me. It does sometimes when I miss meetings or when I let things go. It grabs me. I'm in a dark place. I'm lost. I got to stick close. She says, tell him to stick close. So... And I said, good night, honey. And I said something about, she has a little medical scare. And we have no idea how serious it is or if it's serious at all. But, being alcoholics, you know what they say about alcoholics. If you wake up in the morning, your car is a flat tire, you don't call AAA, you call Suicide Anonymous, And I remember having this feeling last night that this is the first time I've had this feeling of being threatened this deeply since my daughter got sick and died. Reality may be very little, but the feeling was there. And my reaction wasn't, I'm just gonna hang in there until it's over and then I'm getting out. My reaction was, honey, whatever it is, this is a journey we're taking together, and it's gonna be all right, and I love you. So AA has done everything in the world for me. AA has given me everything, and I am wondrously appreciative and blessed. And so I say to you what she says to me, stay close. It's going to be all right.